There's been quite a bit of focus on the different opportunities that exist within AI, and maybe everyone's seen the different robots or talked about some of the different breakthrough technologies with cancer research or the weapons world. But we really wanted to focus here on something that's very important in the government agency space, and that's streamlining the procurement process, finding efficiencies and cost savings within acquisition. Because that has a major impact across government, across each of our agencies. So what we wanted to do was invite three folks that have a unique perspective and the ability to viewpoints, I should say, on this area. So I'm going to introduce all three of those folks, and we're going to get right into it. We have 30 minutes to tackle this issue, so I want to take advantage of all their opportunities to get their insights. So we'll start off here with Shanna Webbers. She's the Chief Procurement Officer over at the IRS. Scott Simpson, he's the Digital Transformation Lead for the Procurement Innovation Lab at the Department of Homeland Security. And finally, Mike Cook, who is the General Manager for the Public Sector at Icertis. So welcome all three of you, and thanks for joining us.
Having me, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So if the three of you don't mind, I'm going to jump right into this. Like I said, we got a power pack 30 minutes. So I want to give an opportunity for everybody to really weigh in as much as possible here. So we're going to start off. I mentioned it a little bit in the introduction, talking about how a lot of the focus when it comes to AI and machine learning might get focused in other areas that might not be as sexy as acquisition and the procurement process. But again, such an important area. So I was wondering, Shanna, if you could kick us off here, talking a little bit about maybe the impact, especially from your stance as the Chief Procurement Officer with IRS, and how much of an impact these technologies can really make.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. I really appreciate it. Just want to start out by saying, boom, procurement's in the house.
All right.
Procurement really is a critical enabler for any organization to meet its mission. And most procurement communities are like mine, and we continue to face the challenge of meeting increasing workloads. We have decreasing staff. We are in a very compliance-heavy culture, and sometimes these things combined really discourage innovation, right? We hear our customers say that the procurement process takes too long. We've got a lot of manual processes that leave little time for us to focus on higher priority work, and and that makes it difficult to keep our employees happy and engaged. And so how do we change that paradigm, right? How do we remove those barriers of tedious, time-consuming tasks that really inhibit our ability to attract and retain employees who will drive efficiencies and engage in critical thinking, thought leadership, and other automation opportunities. It also, like Leslie Field mentioned in the video that you showed starting our panel, we just have so much data that is available to us. It's just rich with our ability to look across the federal government to identify how can we do our operations better and more effective and free up resources, people, and dollars to ensure that we are bringing in the most critical enabling capabilities to our organizations.
Great. Shanna, thank you so much. I failed to mention one quick thing here. We are going to have a unique part of our panel is going to be Wade Forbes. He is going to be illustrating and sketchnoting the discussion today. So yeah, thanks for bringing that back on. So you can see here his hand live. What we're going to do is throughout the discussion today, he's going to create, there you go. Thanks, Wade. We're going to take this, and everyone can take a look at it as it goes through. So we're going to shoot to it throughout the discussion today so everyone can see how this really evolves. Wade does this live for us, and it's really exciting to see how it starts here and then what we have at the very end. So just wanted to introduce that and make sure that everybody at home knows exactly when we shoot to the sketch there, exactly what we're doing. So hopefully everybody enjoys it and goes. But Shanna, I think that's a great start, and I appreciate how you really set the table for the rest of the discussion here, because I think that's really important. One of those areas too, where you really find that impact is the efficiencies, right? Mike, could you talk a little bit about, some of those efficiencies, where they come up within that procurement process when you're utilizing these advanced technologies out there?
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
So I think, and Shanna, you highlighted a big thing, the rapid pace of technology advancement and innovation has just, and I started as procurement, so I'm a procurement nerd, is how do we streamline our acquisition process to make sure we deliver and decrease that time to value? And I think naturally, right, the federal acquisition process and procedures have extensive regulations and policies, which some of them you could say are repetitive in nature. And that's where I think I like to say phase one of AI in the use of RPAs to automate some of those repetitive tasks. I like to refer to it as you kind of shift from this tactical to strategic, allowing your workforce, like Shanna highlighted, the constant do more with less, freeing up time for more strategic and complex tasks. And I think with AI, the intelligent automation and moving to that can be a big enabler for agencies to better deliver on their mission with that laser focus on outcomes. I think when you look at, I like to bucket the kind of efficiency gain into 3 categories: the automate, so kind of that RPA, how can we automate those repetitive tasks? And then the optimize. So when you look at optimization, I think you'll hear Scott talk about a great use case and what they're doing at DHS next. But how do you drive increased compliance, monitor vendor performance, and really optimize that process? And then I think the enhance. So that comes into, we just heard it on, there's so much data out there. And obviously being in government and public sector, the plus and minus is there's publicly available data and there's a lot of it. So how do we process that data, but surface that intelligent insight to allow us to make better decisions?
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. I think that's perfect. I think you just gave me a great segue to Scott here. What we wanted to do here to kick off for Scott is talk a little about what a lot of folks are calling CPARS, or the Contractor Performance Assessment Reporting System. Scott, could you explain a little bit about that program and exactly how that applies to past performance evaluations and how that's helping DHS?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And so CPARS is the name of the system. People call it that. That's what it's called. It's called CPARS. Mm-hmm. And ours is the Artificial Intelligence for Past Performance Project, which we call CPARS AI. And so the CPARS system, like Leslie was talking about in the video, it also contains just a wealth of data. It has over 1 million records for hundreds of thousands of vendors. It's like the big data for government. But accessing that data, it can be difficult. So if I have just a company name and I go in and I'm trying to find a record for some random company that has hundreds of records, it's going to take me a long time to wade through all those records to find the ones that apply to me. Like if I'm buying cybersecurity and you're looking at one of the big vendors who does data centers and ships and airplanes and cyber, how long is it going to take me to find all that? So we're looking at applying artificial intelligence to that process to help the acquisition professionals make their decision. Just like the former panelist was talking about over at TTS and how they are augmenting, right? We don't want the system to make decisions on behalf of the CO. The contracting officer needs to be the one making the decision. They're the one with the warrant, right? So we are augmenting their decision-making process by helping use artificial intelligence like natural language processing and everything else to surface the most relevant reports and evaluations to the top. And so in the future state, you'll be able to upload a solicitation and a couple of vendor names. It'll compare the evaluation reports for those vendors to the solicitation that you've uploaded, and it'll suggest, hey, here's the top matches for you. You should look at these ones first. And at the same time, it can tell you why, right? So it can explain what it's doing, and it can show you red flags. So if those vendors have something that isn't relevant, but maybe there was a termination for default, maybe there was really negative discussion in one of the evaluations, it can surface that too and show you all of that. So that's a little snippet of what we're doing with the CPARS AI project. And it's not just DHS. We partnered with 9 other federal agencies in phase 2 to provide our 4 vendors with 50,000 records to look at, with the end result of building once for everybody and not having us do it once and IRS do it once and everyone else. We just want to do this once so that it's all done. Mm-hmm. And we're engaging with users too. So we have 200 users in our user groups to help them, our vendors, do user-centered design so that it answers the questions and does the functions that our users want.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Shanna, I mean, for something like CPARS, from your viewpoint over at IRS, what's some of the impact that you would see over all those different agencies going forward?
Well, I think one of the things is consistency, right? We need to be consistent and fair. It's critically important because we're talking about the livelihood of our industry partners, right? And depending on what their past performance is, it's really an opportunity where we can ensure that we're getting the best of the best that meet our actual needs. You know, and Scott hit it spot on when he talked about the importance of create it once and then leverage it across the community. Most of our processes and requirements are pretty similar. There's some uniquenesses per the agency, but a lot of what we do is very similar. And so instead of me spending my resources to do something like Scott is doing, I can take different capabilities and different parts of the process. For example, a contract clause logic tool that others would be able to use. So instead of an analyst or a CO contracting officer spending hours and hours combing through various federal acquisition regulations and clauses, that this tool can very quickly scan to based off of natural language processing and other AI capabilities to determine, do we have the right clauses? Are we missing? Are there any out of date? So again, with what Scott's doing on CPARs and allowing us to have that consistency across the federal government, it then frees up others to create other tools that then can also be leveraged. And I think that multiplying capability is what's really going to be game changing for the acquisition community.
Okay. How about from your viewpoint, Mike, from industry, how do you think that's really going to change the process here as well?
Yeah, no, I'm smiling because a lot of the things you just described are things we've been rolling into our platform. And it's, you know, how do you, again, not make the decision? Because being on the vendor side, right, I would never sit here and tell you, hey, this software, this AI technology is going to do everything for you. It really allows you to apply kind of what I'd say that exception-based approach. So when you look at the efficiency gain through the acquisition process, it's flagging things that need attention or the core needs to review or requires that deeper analysis, but it's not going to make the decision for you. And I think the CPARS example is a great example. I think tied into that is when you look at just the overall upfront and historical data that lead into a potential solicitation. So Scott mentioned the scanning of the solicitation, matching to potential vendors is the amount of data on the front end from when a requirement is defined. So when a requirement is defined within that market research phase, how do you avoid kind of the serial RFIs, leverage the historical acquisition data across agencies? So I think, Shanna, you hit on a big thing is leveraging it across agencies and not looking at it just at a department or a specific agency. And we really believe when you bring that in and look at it contextually based on the current acquisition, whether it's similar scope, similar requirements, that will, one, drive efficiency, ultimately ends up in a better outcome. And the AI component of that really allows the faster processing and analysis of that data, but won't necessarily make the decision for the core of the acquisition professional.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. Shanna, I'm going to ask you about workforce development because I think that's something that you're really taking a look at over at IRS and making sure that the right people are in place, whether it be through training or hiring, to utilize some of these new technologies. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing, what the IRS is doing in that space right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting concept because when we recently created a data analytics and technology division, and as the director of that organization, she was walking me through a model that had been created on the impact of attrition, right? So that we could understand what is happening and what are the skill sets that we need to bring on board so that we have a good mix of skill sets within our organization to do the entire core of our mission in procurement. And as we were walking through that, she mentioned that her analyst did not understand the math behind the model, and therefore he was making incorrect assumptions about the information that was coming out of that. And so she had suggested that we consider hiring a statistician. And I'll tell you, not in a million years would I have ever considered or even thought that I would need a statistician skill set within my organization with procurement, but it makes really great sense, right? A lot of the individuals who are doing this work, which is different than how we've historically done it, they need to bring different skill sets to the table. Additionally, as part of that learning process is we partnered with academia and a small business to create some curriculum for the contracting workforce that is very tailored to data analytics and procurement. right? And so I don't need data scientists across my organization, but I do need an organization that is data literate and that they can understand what the output of these tools and technologies bring. How do they assimilate that information? How do they look at that information again so that they can make better decisions moving forward? And so I think that it's really important that we recognize that not everybody will be the same, and we don't need the same skill sets within that, but we do need a baseline and a foundation of understanding of how do you utilize and leverage what comes out of these very powerful tools that are providing us with information. The other area is around storytelling of what this information is as well, right? And so it's one thing for the tool to provide us with information that we can make those decisions, but how it is displayed is really important. For example, I'm a visual learner, and so I'm much more able to look at colors and bubbles or different sizes of scale to help me very quickly determine what that results are telling me, where one of my close colleagues would rather have a spreadsheet, right? Just how he looks at information is different. And so in addition to the skills for the AI, we're also looking for how do we have skills for telling that story, taking that and then telling that story in a way that decision makers can really understand what we are asking them to look at.
Great. Thanks, Shanna. Scott, I'm going to throw it back to you. One of the big areas that we talked a little bit ahead of the panel was predictive analysis. What are some of the things over at DHS and the PIL where you guys are seeing that AI and machine learning can help within predictive analysis for some of these acquisition programs?
Yeah, and so I'll tie it back into the CPARS AI program for past performance. One of the things we're looking at is whether we can use something like natural language processing and sentiment analysis to determine whether there's a mismatch between the rating and the description. And so every time a past performance rating is done, you have to select whether it's exceptional, very good, satisfactory, marginal, or unsatisfactory. And then you have to explain why. And there's a lot of times where the explanation, anecdotally, there's a lot of times where the explanation doesn't seem to match what the rating is. So maybe they gave it an exceptional, but there's a lot of language like, well, they met and they satisfied. Well, that doesn't really justify an exceptional, right? And so we're looking at whether in our same tool, the artificial intelligence can bring that up as a possibility for the acquisition professional to look at, to say, hey, there's a potential mismatch here between the rating and the description that our sentiment analysis has found. You should look at this and determine for yourself whether you think this is right or not. And hey, by the way, here's the phone number and the email address for the person who wrote it. You can contact them, get some more information, make that connection. And so that's what we're looking at right now. And the next thing that we're looking at too is, can you take that and apply it on the front end so that when I'm writing the past performance evaluation, it'll give me tips to say, it looks like you're writing right now at a very good. Is that the one you want to choice you want to make? And again, letting the acquisition professional have full control of that, but that kind of thing. We're also looking at what's the best way to track a past performance. Right now we do it on a yearly basis. Is that the best time to do it? Should we do it more frequently? Is there other predictive analysis and sentiment analysis that we can do to capture that on a routine basis so that when we get to the end and we're putting the past performance evaluation in, it can help us say, here's some of the good things from this year. Here's some of the bad things from this year. Here's maybe a suggestion for where you want to focus your effort, So these are all kinds of the predictive analysis that we're working on with our vendors in the CPARS AI community.
Okay, great. Thanks, Scott. I wanted, part of this too is executing and really being able to incorporate these AI systems into the process at large. Mike, I wanted to ask you how your platform that your team's working over at Icertis gets into that aspect of it and makes it so that some of these AI and machine learning technologies can be utilized from the government perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Mike. So I think one of the key things is, Shanna, you hit on regarding workforce, is we want to make sure that incorporating an AI technology is a usable technology. It doesn't require, a staff of programmers to constantly modify the algorithm. So looking at, I think, kind of what the right strategy is. So first, we like to work with our customers to see what problem are they trying to focus. And I'll just use a recent example of, an acquisition where they wanted to compare the EULA to their standard terms and conditions and flag any exceptions. Now, part of that was obviously running it through our Discover AI and technology piece to flag those exceptions. But then as the AI gets smarter, how do you provide that self-service? So I think in government, when you look at technology right now, the expectation is self-service where you're not dependent on a vendor to modify that algorithm or any of the business rules. And so providing, I think, intuitive self-service, whether it's mapping, so a confidence match on a specific clause or flagging a risk indicator, making sure that based on what the user's doing in the application or the acquisition process, they can do that. And then I think the other thing is the data visualization and analysis of how do you present that or provide multiple. So I like to think about it as improved decision support. So providing that real-time acquisition intelligence, but providing it in ways that you can immediately kind of focus on or go to where the user may want to take action or dig into a little bit deeper. And then I think overall, from how it's incorporated, again, comes to the overall objective or challenge that you're trying to solve and making the implementation kind of the ease of use and user adoption. So you don't want to make it too complex in incorporating it. And that's really our focus is on that self-service, whether it's the upfront intelligence of contract market research or the ongoing contract administration or actions taken through the procurement lifecycle.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Part of that too with workforce, we talked about a little bit before the panel, Shanna, was culture and some of the breakthroughs. I thought it was interesting too for our first speaker, Neil, shared how he's seen a lot of breakthrough in terms of a lot of agencies really starting to embrace AI and machine learning, but there's still a lot of cultural challenges, in that space. Shanna, can you talk a little bit about where you're seeing that and what some of the initiatives that you and your team has taken over at IRS to get that to the next level with adopting these technologies?
Thanks, Mike. You know the phrase that culture eats strategy every day of the week. And so it is really important. I appreciate you bringing that up, that aspect of this. It's probably more simple and easier to create an automated process or to use these tools and technologies, but then getting people to adopt them and really that change management, right? How do you get people to acknowledge that they understand and they want to use a different technology and that they want to do something different is really important, and it's hard, right? And so the culture at the IRS is very risk adverse, as folks would probably understand. It's very risk adverse. And my team is no different than the rest of the organization. They want to make sure that they're making good decisions, the right decisions, and they have a tendency to rely on what they've done in the past that has proven them to be successful. And we had an instance recently of where we needed to add a clause based off of legislation to about 1,500 contracts, and we had basically 9 days to do that. And obviously we could not have done that with our manual current process. And so we took an automation that we had in existence, but it was for a completely different idea and work stream. And it was very unknown. And there was a lot of anxiety and uncertainty with my team, and so the way that we really looked at this was just brought the right folks to the table and had created an environment where everyone's voice was important and they could be heard. And we focused on the risks. What are the risks? What are we missing? What are we not seeing? So that they felt that their position had been heard in the organization. At the end of the day, I made the decision that we were going to move forward using that automation, even though that uncertainty and angst remained with the team. And it was really incredible. We had some great success. The process of adding those modifications, if we'd have done that manually, would have taken about 2,800 man hours based off of our current process. That's about 1 year's worth of work. We were able to, the robotic process automation was able to do it in 3 days. And so for the team, they really saw that we were able to take a chance and use intelligent risk taking. That's what we talk, right? We want to be intelligent with our risk taking. And we identified what all those were. We mitigated the risks. We understood the risk. We moved forward and really saw a huge return on investment. And I think that gave the team a confidence. And additionally, just me ensuring they had top cover. right? I think that's so important for the culture to be able to try something different. They really need to have confidence in their leaders to provide that top cover.
Excellent. Thanks, Shanna. So we have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to end on this question in a rapid fire scenario here, so we can get squeeze all three of you in here. What I wanted to ask is, what do each one of you see as the major next breakthrough, next generation breakthrough for AI technologies in the government space? So I'm going to start with you, Scott.
Put me on the spot, eh? All right. I'm really excited about market research. I think that we do market research the same way we do today as we did like 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I would love to see, and I'm really excited to see how AI is going to help us change that market research by letting us put in a few either keywords or maybe machine read our solicitation again and spit out, well, here are some vendors that have capabilities that are similar to yours based on past performance, based on FPDS, based on their market research, based on GSA schedules, Alliant, and everything else, just to say, here's a starting point for you, instead of you having to go out and crawl all of that. So that's what I'm really excited about, because I think that takes us into the 21st century for procurement and market research.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. Mike, you're up next.
Yeah, so I could get away with saying ditto, because I think that's a big focus area from a market research standpoint. But I think just the overall market research in context of acquisition planning. So it's not necessarily kind of a cookie cutter. There's processes align that, but I think the AI and what I'd say kind of that intelligent augmentation can really facilitate, streamline, or make that acquisition planning and the market research more efficient. I think the other thing somewhat related to your question and from a vendor perspective, we're really focused on is, as you move forward with AI, the focus on responsible AI and ethical AI. And so as you start to utilize and see a broader adoption of AI technologies, especially being a procurement nerd, when we're looking at fair and open competition, how do you continue to monitor and make sure that your algorithm, your AI is fair and impartial, transparent, explainable, and of course, from a security standpoint, making sure that it's secure and has that ongoing monitoring. So I think that's another area that I think as we see a broader adoption of AI technologies, the focus on the responsible AI.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Last but not least, Shanna, close us out.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. It's hard to follow those two, but really I would say the next biggest breakthrough, what I see is really that it's no longer necessary for us to guess when a contract will be assigned or when a background investigation can be completed. We have a lot of actual historical data that can look at time it takes to sign a contract or do a security clearance. And, by allowing these learning algorithms to strategically predict when these key events will occur is going to be huge for us. And we can guesstimate, we can have a pretty accurate ballpark time frame of when certain events are going to happen. And the fact that the federal contracting spends about $500 billion a year is pretty significant to have that crystal ball to show when things are going to get done. And if I may, I just wanted to also chime in to say that now I think there's an ability to use predictive analysis to assess the likelihood of when a vendor will succeed in performing a contract, right? So traditionally, contracting officers have heavily relied on proposals that were in writing to select the team or the best vendor. But now with the ability to data mine millions of contract transaction records, we can ascertain which bidders truly have the experience of similar size, scope, and complexity and have performed successfully on those past products and projects. And so I think that being better informed with these decisions is really going to be huge for us within the contracting and procurement space and making the wisest possible decisions and be good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars.
Fantastic. Thanks, Shanna. So that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much to all three of you. Before we go, though, I did want to throw back to our illustration to see how that came to the end here. And encourage everybody watching at home. We're going to have, there it is. Thank you, Wade. We're going to have that posted. Not only the end product PDF is going to be posted to our event page, but you'll also get to see a time-lapse video. So exactly how this all came together. It's pretty cool. Good opportunity to check it out and a good takeaway from the discussion, the fantastic discussion that we had here today on the topic of procurement. So thank you again to all three of you, Scott, Mike, and Shanna. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise on this issue. Okay. Excellent. So our next panel we're going to go to next is going to be focused on AI support to mission integrity. And it's going to be moderated by our staff writer, Kate Macri, with GovernmentCIO Media and Research. So after our video introduction, over to you, Kate. Thanks.